appreciate everybody that has joined us today. We're excited about having an opportunity to share and support people, even in this. And one of the things that we know and do best is probably, well, definitely leadership. And so this is actually the first in a series of things that we will be offering. And so this is our first webinar, and as you know, we're Mike and Wendy Perry, and we are a Catalyst. And just this year, we have taken it from Catalyst Executive Advising and Development to Catalyst Beyond Leadership, because what we've learned and found is that leadership is a little bit more than just telling people how to do it or what to do, but really connecting in a meaningful way and walking with them on that journey. So
Yeah.
today, you've joined us for life balance, priorities, pressure, and presence. And we're certainly in an unprecedented time, but there's some things that we can do and that still hold true. So this is as much about encouragement as it is about education. And hopefully, we can share some things that'll help you today.
Yeah. Well, in order to lead effectively, the first person you have to lead is yourself. And people say that often. It's very popular, it's cliche almost, you have to lead yourself first. Oftentimes we don't really even know what that means. And if we know it, we don't do it, which kind of makes us hypocritical, right? So it's important as we serve others to understand how to serve ourselves. Because have you ever worked for somebody who sent out emails at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning? And oftentimes when we speak to leaders who do that, they will say, well, I don't expect a response at that time. I'm just getting it off my desk. Well, that's nice. But the people who are receiving those messages often, the perception is they believe you want a response, or if they don't respond, then that might be a problem. It may say something about their own work ethic, right? So,
Mhm.
and Tony put in the chat that in the military, that's very common. It is very, very common
Yeah.
for people to shoot things out at all times of the day and night, and then, um, come back around and say, "Hey, did you get my email?" Well, yeah, I got it because my phone buzzed at 4 o'clock.
Mhm.
So we actually, and we've met several people who actually expect an answer to those, a timely answer. And so your own perception about what this whole idea of balance is about actually does impact the culture that you build.
Mhm.
And so that's part of why we're talking about this today. But we're also talking about this today because we're in a time where everyone has in effect been told to stay home. And so,
Excuse
well,
me.
in Georgia, it's stay home, or you can go to the grocery store or go fishing. It's an amazing time right now. Loving Georgia, more or less. But um, stay home. And so now everyone, people who didn't ask, are now compelled to stay in their homes and figure out a way, to make it work. And but what it's also created for a lot of people, and I've seen these folks writing, they're out there and they're saying, all the things they're doing home projects, they're spending more time with family, they're building fires, they are roasting marshmallows, doing all kinds of cool stuff. And so there are those people who have figured it out, and then there are the rest of us. And so part of today is really about having a conversation about how we figure that out. While there is space, how do you create the space? And what do you think about this idea of balance in the first place? What is work-life balance? Where did it come from? And does what we used to do work anymore?
Yeah, well, it was
Yeah.
something that you said that was key, and
Hmm.
I think that we should talk about that just a little bit in
Yeah.
terms of the culture that you create,
Yeah.
because like Tony mentioned, the thing about the military, and um, also Paula G is definitely familiar with, is this idea of 24-hour access,
Hmm.
because you work for me or you're within my chain, then there is this 24-hour access. There's the expectation, there's the action and the expectation that you'll respond. So can you talk a little bit about, the culture that you built?
Yeah. Well, the culture, I believe the culture in an organization it's like the air that you breathe. Um, it is, the for lack of a better example, it's the fish in a fish tank. I'm sorry, the water rather that there's fish swimming in a tank. It surrounds you from the time you walk into a place, and even follows you when you leave. So the culture is really about who we are, what we're about, what this place is about, and in a lot of ways, how you feel when you get there. How motivated are you? Why? What motivates you? Because all motivation is not equal, right? If it's about, if fear motivates you, if the culture is a culture of fear, well, in that case, people do the minimum so they don't get in trouble. I will do what I need to do in order to not be annihilated when the boss comes, right? I'll do what I need to do in order to not be publicly humiliated. And I use those are all real examples. People use those type things to try and motivate people, right? And so that shapes a certain type of culture. But also there are cultures where you feel it. People often refer to a family feel, right, or team feel, or a winning culture and things like this. So, but that's all shaped by the from the top, right? Because you can't shape the entire culture from pockets, right? You can't take division X and then somehow have that sweep over the entire enterprise. If you're really going to shape culture, that environment that people walk into, that has to happen really from the top down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so one thing we wanted to share with you, and we may have neglected to do this at the beginning, is, we have a small group today. So we'd invite you to really, engage us in discussion. So if you have a question, or there's something on your mind, or something that you'd like to add, by all means, feel free to either drop it in the chat box, or just let us know, because we can have a conversation, and we don't want to miss an opportunity to do that.
That's right.
So you said work-life balance, what is it, right? And so I've done a few talks on work-life balance. And one of the things that I start out with at the very beginning is that there's no such thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so what do you think about that? Even the concept of work-life balance?
Well, yeah, the concept is funny because it's actually flawed from its inception. Um, Back in the 20s, 30s, when Henry Ford was really beginning to get up to speed and figured out this assembly line process, and there had been a call for years at that point to reduce the workday down, right, to get the number of hours in a day down. But the problem was productivity. So Henry Ford figured this thing out where, hey, I line up a bunch of people and a bunch of parts, you ratchet, you turn a screwdriver, you hammer, you weld, right? And he was able to boost productivity tremendously in a shorter amount of time. And around there began the 8-hour workday, right? And so the idea was 8 hours work, 8 hours rest, 8 hours of recreation, I guess, play.
Mm.
Well, it's flawed from the beginning because it's 8, 8, and 8. So we know that the company, they're going to get their 8. So now all of a sudden you got to make those hours up somewhere. Where do you make those up? Is it rest or is it recreation? One of those has got to pay, right? And so, but then the government made that law, and so that's been the law, right? And so I think since the early 40s, and so this idea of work-life balance actually came out of Europe, and and the idea was that you could somehow balance those things, right? And your work, your life, your recreation. Well, interestingly, many countries, like they've done it more or less. I mean, they made it a focus. That is, the focus on you and paid time off and all this stuff. Many countries have done it. The U.S. and I'll put some numbers up here in a second, but the U.S. is among the richest countries in the world, and the only one who does not have a requirement, a law for paid time off.
Right.
Right. So, yeah.
Yeah. Paid time off, vacations, mental health days, naps, all of those things that other countries have really capitalized
Yeah.
on, based on science and history,
Mm-hmm.
that have said, hey, these are the things that will actually make your people more productive. I think if you look at what the motivators are, the motivation is in terms of efficiency, you mentioned efficiencies,
Mhm.
efficiencies, capitalism, and opportunity. And so when you get to really what drives the workforce or the work effort, that's where there's conflict, right? In order
Mhm.
for us to be able to accomplish more with less in less time, then that means something has to be sacrificed. And
Mhm.
so I think in the US, more often than not, what's sacrificed is whatever personal time or personal interest or personal needs you have in support of the mission.
Yeah, in support of the mission and support, in the interest of the revenue,
Hmm.
right? Moving into that new market,
Yeah.
making these people more productive, and so this really kind of became this idea became very personal to me because we both were in the army, and I think I was actually in year 21, retired, preparing to retire, having created a life where everything was grind, everything for the entire career. And then we went to graduate school at the same time,
Hmm.
which I don't recommend for
No.
anybody. That was craziness. But we went to grad school at the same time. And then we um, just continued on with our careers, right? More
Hmm.
senior, more responsibility, et cetera.
Hmm.
And it was just all the work, the work, the work as we raised two daughters, as
Yeah.
we moved several times, as we tried to do work in the community, and that was, well, it was hard, right? But
Yeah.
I didn't really appreciate um, what it meant to be try to focus where you need to focus until I went to Georgetown's coaching program, if you
Hmm.
remember.
Hmm.
And I came back with an assignment one time, and the assignment was basically to just notice. And I'm like, well, I don't even notice. Give me some tools and tips and tricks or whatever.
Hmm.
No, just notice. Try to be present, be aware of what's happening around you. And so the assignment was not to discover what I did, but I'm sitting there in the kitchen, actually, on the computer, and one of the girls walks up, and she was talking to me about something, and I never broke contact with the computer. I just was typing. I'm like, yeah, okay, yep, got it. And all of a sudden, I began, I zoomed out and I saw myself,
Hmm.
and I'm like, man, I'm missing a lot here. And I decided to, at that moment, push away, literally kind of push back from the computer and turn my chair.
Yeah.
And I decided from that moment forward, that's what I would do. Whatever they had to say, I would listen. I would stop what I was doing and just take it in. Now, what that meant was, and I didn't really realize I was about to get a real education in hair and makeup. I wrote an article about it. In
Right.
fact, I'll share it with y'all after this is done if you want it. But I wrote a little article about that and
Hmm.
about what stopping and being present did to begin to transform those relationships at a time when I believe it was really critical for those relationships to transform. That is my relationship between me and my daughter.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that really was what birthed this whole concept of, or at least was one of the seeds in the work life presence model that we'll talk about and reveal a little bit later. But in terms of not really trying to achieve or accomplish work life balance, and Tony, you said if you have two wolves, which one survives? The one you feed. Exactly, right? So whatever you give more of your time to, most of your attention to, or your focus, that is the thing that's going to grow. And each of us who have either started in small business, run your own business, or those types of things, we make excuses about, or we rationalize why it requires that you give so much more time, that you
Yes.
sacrifice some of what your luxuries and the nice to haves for your vision, and what that requires. So we talk about this whole aspect of grinding, right? Grinding towards success. And so one thing that also comes up when we talk about work life presence, is that women, particularly women professionals, are challenged with this, women in leadership, throughout their careers, because the expectation is, especially if there are children in the home, that they're going to find a way to take care of those children, take care of the home, and also do their job. And so you don't have an opportunity to not be present because their kids have direct access. you must stop and it's not a choice. And so there's some, there's a little disparity in that. But I think you brought up a really good point in saying that now that you're aware, you had to choose to do something different.
Well, but I'm glad you brought up that point about a lot of women in business,
Mm-hmm.
because you mentioned, there's these, clearly women are in the workplace much more than they were like when we were coming up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So um, there's an expectation at work that you're going to handle your business at work.
Yep.
And then there's an expectation when you get home that, there's all these things potentially that you got to handle.
Mm-hmm.
What, what, what do you sacrifice? What suffers as a result?
Right. Potentially everything, but more often than not, it's work that suffers, right? And
Mm,
so it is a classic conundrum, as it were, where you have to decide what is going to have the most importance for you. And
mm,
more often than not, women choose family.
mm,
And when they choose family, either to have children or prioritize family, then that moves them to a different category in terms of being able to compete.
mm,
So when you're absent or you're not available or you're not there, and doing 80 hours a week like your male counterparts who have prioritized work over family in most instances, let's
mm,
just be real, then they move themselves out of contention for top leadership position.
mm. Okay. Okay. Well, one of the questions we have here is, as a
Mm-hmm.
dual military couple, what was good that you used today as a couple?
Wow, as a dual military couple, what was good that we used today?
There's a whole lot I've thrown out. I'll say that. But,
Well, yeah. So what one thing that we have always managed to do as a couple who happen to also be serving together at the same time was that we never lost sight that we had to prioritize our relationship,
mhm,
that our marriage had to be something that we were intentional about, that we worked on, that we paid attention to, because that would be the thing that sustained us beyond kids and beyond the military. And so I think that was something good that we used then and that we use today still.
well, Wendy's being kind when she says that. What that looked like at some of the most difficult times was, I come home and Wendy's like, "Hey, we're going to Florida. Pack a bag, right, and bring your laptop and that stack of books."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what it looked like sometimes. Just, really carving, because we're always waiting for the time to come, and the time never comes.
Yeah,
And so you find yourself trying to wedge things in and carve out time.
yeah.
Well, what has happened now with COVID-19 is that basically almost every governor has said, boom, go home.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, not only go home, but yeah, hey kids, you all go home too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And oh, and by the way, shut down all those places that you used to go. And so now we're in a place where there, this is in some ways, tragedy always kind of births something.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, tragedy is birthing opportunity, opportunity to really reconceive how we do work in school. And if you've not been listening, there are a lot of conversations happening about that.
Mm-hmm.
The annual staff meeting, board meeting, whatever, a lot of those things will never be the same. People are not going to get on planes and go and do those things. Um, a lot of things you used to travel for, you're just not going to do. And even now you're seeing possibilities, and you better believe a lot of the businesses that you work with or that you patronize, they're seeing possibilities and changing up their models as well.
Yeah.
And so since everybody's changing, one of the best times to change is when there's utter confusion. That's one of the best times to go and do something different. And so before people get settled down, it's important to have this conversation about what you do with this time that's been given,
Mm-hmm.
if balancing your life is important to you. So I want to share a few of these,
Yeah. And
because I think this is important.
uh-huh. Are you gonna share it right now?
Yeah, unless
Okay.
you got something.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that you mentioned when is it a good time to adopt new behaviors,
Yeah.
right? And the idea would be ideally before you hit a pain point, right?
Hmm.
You don't want to be forced to make changes that you could have voluntarily made, and so we find ourselves with a sense of a loss of control over our schedules and our freedom to be able to come and go when we please. but you have a unique opportunity to actually get ahead of some things. And so a lot of what we're sharing is really to prepare you for what's next, not what's now.
Yeah, no, that's good. And so I want just share a few of these numbers with you. Everybody is waiting to get back to normal, right? Well, this is what normal is, right? It's this. These numbers are really, I mean, they shift some in terms of the year, but these are fairly stable until just weeks ago, right? Americans left, and this is a 2016 stat, 662 million unused vacation days on the table in 2016. Um, Half of senior leaders say that company culture encourages vacation, right? Half of senior leaders out there say, hey, our company, vacation, good thing. About 30% of their non-managers agree with that perspective. There's a disconnect, right, between what people say and what they're doing. About 2 in 3, that's 66%, workers on average engage in some work while on vacation. How many of you, you know what, all of you, I'm not even, everybody, right? You're sitting at work, and on vacation, you're supposed to be disconnected and unplugged, and that email pops through. If I send an email to you, on my end, I'm getting your out of office reply. And then all of a sudden, I'm getting your reply, your response. 2/3 of people, and I think that's an underestimate. Senior leaders, okay, workload, they said 52% of senior leaders say their workload blocks them from taking time off. Almost half, 47% say that it's harder to take time off the higher they get in the organization. And about 46%, get this, believe that no one can effectively do the job while they are away. Are you serious, people?
Yeah, so I've coached quite a few executives who struggle with that, and while they say that they have established an environment of trust, a culture of trust, and that they believe that their employees will do what is required in their absence, they say it, but they don't act on it. At the root of it really is the lack of trust, and the lack of true faith in everyone else's abilities, which really speaks to their leadership. And so it can be challenging because one of the things that, and I'll just say this, I challenge people all the time. If you die tomorrow, what happens? And as a nurse, that life and death always comes up. It's always the extreme of what happens if, for whatever reason, you were completely removed from your current circumstances. Well, that just takes too long to say. If you die tomorrow, what happens with everyone else? And it I think it forces you to stop in your tracks to really consider how essential you are. And so when we start to look at who is essential to the mission, if you want to call it a mission, your company's goals or vision, who's essential, who's not essential. I would say that everyone is essential to some extent.
No question.
And part of the responsibility is really discovering how essential they are and then rewarding that.
Yeah. And you mentioned trust, and we're going to be dealing with trust as we go in some future dates. And we'll probably also be dealing with trust when we're both on with Ron Harvey on Monday mornings at 7:30, really talking about crisis in leadership. And so that'll be every Monday for the foreseeable future. Anyway, 7:30 in the morning. So if you want information on that.
I'm sorry, that's Ron Harvey Sr.
Ron Harvey Sr.
Right.
Correct.
So we have Ron Harvey Jr. that's on with us today. So we're glad you could join us, Ron Harvey Jr.
Yeah. So so I'm curious if any of you all want to comment, and I'll give it just about 5 seconds so we don't have the long, awkward virtual pause. But what is it with us in America and work? What do you think that's about? Why don't we take time off? What do you think that's about?
Mike, this is Paula G. And as you were sharing, I was thinking about my experiences of being in Europe, both recently with my daughter and her family, and then years ago as a military spouse. And your points were well taken in that it seems like the rest of the world has figured out how to take time to smell the roses. and still get their work done, but we are in this grind mindset, and I think part of it is just we're in such a competitive environment.
Mhm.
We're in a competitive environment. We see someone else doing, and we want to top whatever it is that they're doing. We want to do better than what they're doing. So that was my comment on that. And then the other comment that I had was in regard to what you all were talking about in regard to management. I remember I had a CEO when I worked for the YMCA in Baltimore, and he gave me advice. I asked for advice because I had been given a new leadership position. And he said to me that you should be able to go fishing and no one know that you're gone. And that if you train them, you have to trust your own training.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Yeah,
You
that's really good.
yeah, yeah. So those are just a couple of things I want to share.
Yeah, thank you, Paula. And so, Paula G, while we have you, could you tell people how they can connect with you since you're on?
Yes. Oh, thank you.
Sure.
My website is Paula G Voice, www.paulagvoice, and my radio, television information is there as well. I host a radio show on Wednesday mornings and a television show. It's an internet television show on Thursday mornings at 11:30 a.m.
Nice.
But thank God for internet television
Indeed.
because it's on auto. Because it's on auto, so I get to, be on other people's webinars and shows and so forth
That's
while my
awesome.
show is running, as well. But thank you so much for that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Y'all need to catch Paula G. Just one of these people who is down in Atlanta, just changing the world, though, really
Mhm.
having a major impact, in a lot of areas. So we appreciate that you're on today. But there's
Thank you.
something oh yeah, absolutely. There's something you said that really jumped out at me. She said that uh, they're learning how to smell the roses. They're smelling the roses, right? Well, in other countries, people are trying to figure out how to smell the roses. We're trying to figure out how to sell the roses.
Mm.
It's- right? I mean, that,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, I like that. Yes,
yeah.
Mhm.
yeah.
And anybody, if you watch, you can use that for free.
Oh my goodness.
Just give me a
Hmm.
little shout out. No, I'm just joking, but it is, there's so much focus on capitalizing and so much
Yes.
focus on,
Yeah.
my grind and what I do next. And even, and honestly, as a leader, I've been guilty of, okay, this is fine here today.
Mhm.
What's next?
Yeah.
Where are you going next? Not necessarily until much later. How's your family? How you doing there? Are you spending the time that you need to take care of yourself?
Yeah. Well, I think that people are we lose focus, and I mentioned at the top that capitalism kind of rules the day in our country. We are an economy focused, economy driven society, and the even now and during this crisis, we are weighing decisions based on the impact on economy versus the impact on humanity, and I think it's costing us. Of course, that's my opinion,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I think when you put money before people, you will lose, and
Hmm.
unfortunately. That's is exactly what happens in many of our organizations, and so while those organizations become successful or money drivers, the people within them are the ones that are suffering. And
Hmm.
so when I say you'll lose, that doesn't mean that you won't be successful, but it means that maybe the most important part of what you're doing is the thing that's being sacrificed. I
Yeah.
do want to say on Tony's behalf, because he said the Wi-Fi out there is terrible. So in the chat, he put in there that he's retired and he still works over 45 hours a week.
Tony.
More
Tony.
now that more now that he's using Zoom more. 7:30 in the morning, man, I'm retired. I'm still asleep. LOL. Yeah, I keep trying to tell Mike 10 a.m. is when retirees start working. He
People.
just doesn't believe me.
So
And then it says, I think the military has trained me to focus on the mission. It's hard to reprogram myself.
yeah.
Amen.
But yeah, what I discovered when we began to work more in corporate areas. I expected something different because I
Mm-hmm.
thought, yeah, it's military, we do more before, 6 a.m. most people do all day. And that's actually true because nobody was, 7 o'clock meetings, that just wasn't happening. And once we got out, started dealing with these companies. But what I discovered is that pull or that press to produce and to not disappoint and to show up, and to sacrifice things that are very important in the interest of the mission or the goals or that project, that is really strong outside the military as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right, everybody has these goals and things they like to do, and we make decisions and we sacrifice, and we say things like, hey, I'm doing this for my family, I'm doing this for you,
Mm-hmm.
and we're going to be all right, and I'm going to get this, whatever, this promotion, that house, that car, those clothes. I'm going to put us in a better position.
Yeah.
And I think what we have to ask ourselves is, what is that better position? What is success for a company? Is success really is it revenue really? Right? Obviously you need money to operate, but does that equal success? And in fact, I've considered um, removing, and this may be completely crazy, right? But removing things like profitability from our value proposition,
Yeah.
because I believe that the people will take care of the profitability if you pour and go all in on the people, give them a vision, right? Give them space to work, care about what they care about, then they're going to take care of that profit line.
Yeah, yeah. I think I think all that's good, and everything that we're saying is great when you have people. Um, but your people may just be you. And if it's just you, one of the points that you made earlier is that it starts with you, right? Leading others starts with leading yourself. I think that some of the examples that we have, and to your point, we still have a lot of baby boomers that are active and contributing to our workforce, and their work ethic was completely different than what everyone that came behind them, right? And so the whole mentality about you had to establish that 9 to 5 job,
Yeah.
you had to work to provide for your family, and that you would be rewarded later, right? Work first and reward later. That still kind of runs through, and they continue to work in their 70s and 80s now, working for the later, and they're missing the now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the now is very important. By the way, one last point that I think is really critical on this slide that we have up here is that, and we call them work martyrs, right? People who are like, oh yeah, I'll be the one, I'll sacrifice, I'll stay, I'm going to work harder, I'm going to work longer, I'm going to sacrifice all the rest of my life to do this. Um, they are less likely to be promoted or receive raises. So think about that, right? The whole idea is to meet this expectation or to set the stage for, progression and promotion and all that. People who tend to sacrifice everything else in the interest of work apparently tend to be promoted less and
Mm-hmm.
don't make as much money.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and just overall job satisfaction and life satisfaction
Yeah.
is low and poor among those people, right?
Yes.
And we can talk about parallels between, or the differences between military and civilian life, but the other piece in that is um, there's a reintegration that has to happen when you're deployed for a mission, right?
Mhm.
You deploy, we all, and everybody on here knows this, but the people that don't deploy with you are forced to make everything happen in your
Mhm.
absence. And then when you come back, you reintegrate not just to your work family, but to your family. And it's a process, right? What happens outside of the military is a similar thing. If you put um, the organization, the business, the mission, your vision, and everything before family, then you are missing out on the opportunity to connect and establish your role in those
Mhm.
relationships. And so we've seen that play out quite a bit where when now that person who has been present but absent decides that they want to reintegrate,
Mhm.
everyone else has moved on.
Yeah.
And now you're becoming an empty nest or something else is changing and you don't even recognize each other. There's nothing there for you because you've been absent because you prioritized work over
Mhm.
family for that entire time.
And I think that's a good point to segue to the idea that, balance, it is difficult, some say impossible, just doesn't exist. And so the shift is really to this idea about placing the energy where it's required in a given moment, deciding where it's going to be, what it's going to be, and doing that. So people who are really great at at creating a calendar and sticking to it, I believe, set themselves up to be a little better. Now, then it's just a matter of what's on your calendar, right? But if you say, hey, I'm gonna write on Monday morning for 2 hours, boom, and that's where I'm going to be completely. And then I'm gonna do lunch, and then maybe I make some calls, and then maybe I return emails, and then maybe I sit down with the kids. But deciding that you're going to be, so the times won't equal out necessarily,
Right.
but it's important to be able to determine what you're going to do in a given moment and determine what the rules are. So my new rule was, with Sydney and Morgan walking to the office, whatever I'm doing, unless I'm in the middle of talking to somebody, I'm going to stop, push back, turn, and speak to
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? How have I done? Now, we're not trying to be all perfectionistic people here. I haven't like been 100%. I've done pretty well at that though, I believe. And so it's about present. Where are you? What are you doing? And can you just be in the place that you need to be? And so if there's a major project you're working on or a meeting you're having, can you be in that place? Because people think that they can multitask. It's actually not multitasking, right? The way our brain works, we can attend to one thing at a time.
Mm-hmm.
One
Fully,
thing. Hmm?
fully,
No,
fully
one thing,
focused.
period, right? But what people tend to do is they can shift. Some people are really good at shifting, right? Changing channels. But the problem with that is that as you leave a task, you do something else and you try to come back, there's a ramp up period, right? And so it takes time to get back to where you were. So no matter what, if you're shifting, you're losing time and energy, right?
Right. We talked about
So
that. We Someone has shared with me that they named it switching costs,
mhm,
right? That the time and the effort to refocus when you're switching between two or more activities, there are costs or things that you lose in that time.
mhm,
And it is that you're focused on this, you transition, so you have to shift your focus from the one to the next. And there's a process and brain activity that happens between the two. So there are
yeah.
costs to multitasking.
Yes. And so, I shared that the human experience, this is a model that we created. Some people will recognize components of this: biological, psychological, social. It's something we've used in behavioral health for a number of years. We added this environmental component where you can see psychological to cognitive a bit. And but this wasn't designed for the idea of life balance, but it actually speaks to major areas that you need to be thinking about. Biological really involves, things like health and how and even the impact of some of the psychological stuff, right? How much stress you're under, et cetera. But it deals with this human being and how we function physically, and the impact that has. And then we have the cognitive piece, and that's really about how we make meaning of the world, and how we think, and what our beliefs and biases and motivations are. um, Obviously you got to take care of that, how
Mm-hmm.
you think, how you see things, and that requires some work, right? You got to spend some time doing that. The social piece deals with family. How do we interact with other human beings around us? What are the dynamics at work? What are the things happening at home? Social influences shape our daily experiences. And then there's the environmental piece, the physical place where you are, the amenities, the location, the temperature, the climate. Even I believe that culture kind of fits into the environmental piece a bit,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Okay.
And so that's the model we came up to help you just kind of understand kind of a broader perspective, to give them a broader perspective on the human experience is what we call it, right? Because everything that we do impacts some experience. But I want to share this model another model we created this as well.
Yeah, but before
Mhm.
you do, I know you have it up there right now. I
Yep.
just wanted to speak to Tony's point earlier when he said that it's hard to reprogram yourself. And I think when you look at the model that we just talked about in that cognitive space, it is hard to reprogram ourselves, even when we have more information. And as it said, if when you know better, you do better. Um, that could be true, but it takes more than just having knowledge of what may work for you, and it takes more than just being able to schedule your time in a way that helps you
Mhm.
then see it and create like a spreadsheet, as it were. How will you spend your time? There's another element to what you conceive, and it's the action element.
Well,
How do you move from conception to action? And so this next handout that we've given out really goes to what are the action steps? How do I now become more present? How do I determine um, what I'm doing and what my current state is?
so if you all want this, actually, we're gonna, if we have your email, we'll email this out.
Yeah.
But there's a handout. It has some stats on it. It has some perspective. There's some perspective building there that we want to create with that particular tool. But on the back of it, it has some things that I believe help you to make it personal. But first, the model really deals with, and it's broken down into three sections. What we call, and these are all levels of priority, right? Meta, macro, and micro.
Yeah. What is the model?
It's now the life priority practice model. It used to be something much longer, but I'm like, yeah, that makes no sense. So life priority and practice, right? What's important to you and what do you do? And so the way the model is built, first of all, you should notice that everything that we do sits within a particular culture, because with culture comes expectations and pressure and things like that. So I thought it was important, right? We thought it was important to include that element of it.
Yeah.
But then we have meta, right? So that first outer layer is values, meta priorities, values, beliefs, vision, things like that, that tend to give people some direction, right? But all those things require some action in order to live out. So then that next layer in is macro. So these are things that are not necessarily in your space, so to speak, but these are things that you need to do. Vacation, and these are, and this, no model is perfect, right? But this one, the macro deals with, we get some action things there, vacation days, holidays, milestones, major events. If you think of it from a calendar perspective, these are things that happen occasionally along the way on a calendar, at that macro level.
Mm-hmm.
The micro level is where the rubber meets the road, and it's where you then begin to live out what it is you say,
Yeah.
right? And so we're talking, do you pause in the morning and evening? Do you worship? Do you take lunch breaks? Do you go on date nights if you're married or dating? Do you establish boundaries for yourself so that you can be present in whatever that thing is that you want to be involved in? And so that's kind of conceptually how that model works. But we provided a few questions to really help bring that to life, to really make it personal. The first question is, what do you value most? And don't worry about taking notes. Like I said, if we have your email, we'll send it. And if we don't have your email, just shoot us a note with your email and we'll send this. But it's like, what do you value most? That's the first question. Because there's a lot of things that we say we value, but if you begin to look at our life and look at what we do, it doesn't necessarily reflect. So the next question is, what does my calendar, my schedule, my routine over the next 6 months reflect? In what ways does it reflect what I value?
Right.
Is it there?
Yeah, because what we found is people will say that they value something the most, but then when you get to that second question, it is evident that although that's the thing that you say that you value the most, it is not the thing that you're spending the time on or the thing that you're feeding, as you mentioned, Tony, earlier. Mm-hmm.
So next question is, what are my day-to-day habits and routines that help me reflect and focus on what is most important? And then number 4, it's a biggie. Some people may be even afraid to answer this one.
Yeah.
Who or what needs more of my attention right now?
And we're in a unique time where, when you identify who or what needs more of your attention, specifically the who, we now have an opportunity to connect in ways that we may not have before.
Yeah.
Um, you know, Connecting over a Zoom call, FaceTime, Skype, or something, making a phone call, sending letters or cards and things that we had gotten away from, but reconnecting it and or connecting with people that we've lost contact with. Hmm.
And the last one, actually maybe scarier than the previous,
Yeah.
is who do I empower to keep me honest about how I spend my time and what I focus on? Everybody needs accountability.
Yeah.
And, a lot of times people will kind of get to a certain space or a certain station in life where they believe, hey, I don't need anybody to tell me about me anymore. And that's just not true. Everybody needs someone who can speak into their life and say, hey, are you doing what you said you're going to do? Or, hey, you know what, you're doing that thing that you said you weren't going to do.
Yeah.
And so that's really important. So those 5 questions are on that document, and we'll email that out.
Yeah. So with some of my coaching clients, when I get to accountability, I often tell them to identify 3 people, right? Or maybe 2 people, but in these 3 categories: somebody who will call you up. If you are not doing what you're supposed to be doing, they will get you on the phone and they will get your attention and say, hey, you're not doing what you said, or you said you wanted to run 3 times a week, let's go. That person that'll call you up. The next person is someone who will call you out, who's not afraid to tell you to your face that you lied or you're failing or whatever, but they're there. They love you and they support you, but they're willing to call you out. And then the last one is the person that can call your bluff. And because a lot of us can talk a good game, and we can rationalize, and we can talk about how our priorities have superseded some of our personal plans. But you need somebody that can tell you, hey, you know what? No, no, that's just not going to fly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to believe you. So that is sometimes helpful in terms of accountability. Or that's something that I share with some of my clients.
Awesome. Yeah, thank
Mm-hmm.
you. So that we'll pause because we're in our last 5 minutes. Are there any questions or comments about anything you've heard so far?
Michael, it's Paula again.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Just really a recap on some things, just some thoughts, not really questions. But I think Wendy said the culture helps the environmental piece. I think she said something to that effect. And it took me back to when we were stationed in Hawaii. And I was working as a director at the YMCA. And I asked the CEO there for advice on working with the staff, because my staff were Hawaiians. And she said, or he said, take care of your staff and your staff will take care of you. And I think you all mentioned something earlier about the culture and taking care of people, and the profit will come. And I'm a witness to that, in that experience, and that, my priority was taking care of my staff, and in turn, when I was absent, or things were not going well, my staff took care of me, took care of the branch, and in turn, the profit came, as you said. And I believe the gentleman earlier mentioned about, or we were talking earlier about our mindset. I think that is so huge in the mindset. When you were asking earlier about, why do we grind? Why do we grind so much in the U.S.? A lot of it has to do with the mindset. Some of the things that you all mentioned, wow, did they hit home? The baby boomer mindset, I'm a witness. Military reintegration, I'm a witness. Reprogramming ourselves. In those difficult times, those transitions. The soldiers out in the field, he comes home, he has to transition and reintegrate. Back into the home. The family has to adjust. I think in my book, I had mentioned that the challenge that we had as a couple, with that transition. So I think you all, really, really made some great points, and I just thank you all for for doing this on a weekly basis. I look forward to the rest of the month.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paula. Yeah, and we'll be back here every Thursday, and we made a rapid transition into this particular thing, and we'll be putting out the topics are for the rest of the month here in the next few
Okay.
days, and then as we get into May, we'll go ahead and post those toward the end of April as well. But we will definitely be here because there is much to discuss. And so we just appreciate your input, Paula. We appreciate you, Tony, out there. Even though Tony is like in a camper on the beach somewhere, so I don't know. I'm a little
Yes.
jealous right
We're
now.
not gonna hate. We're not gonna hate.
I'm hating. I'm actually hating right now.
And he said he's working hard. He's working
That's
hard.
what he said.
And I like that he shared that his wife will call him out.
Mhm.
And he liked what you said about selling the roses. In America, we sell the roses.
Mhm.
And Paula, he actually wants you to mention what is your show again, and his son, that he has a son that lives in Atlanta. So if you could share again your show and that contact information.
Okay. My radio show is the Paula G Show on Survival Radio Network on Wednesday evenings at 8:30 p.m. The television show is My Journey with Paula G, which airs on WATC2TOO.TV on Thursday mornings at 11:30 a.m. The My Journey with Paula G is a faith-based, where we speak with guests who are juggling this journey we call life, while walking in the gifts and talents that God has given them. And then the radio show is worldwide conversations. And my goal on that show is the guests that I have on, that we have worldwide conversations, because my audience listens from a variety of areas around the globe. And, my goal for that show is to have everyone engaged, something that everyone can relate to and take away from, listening for an hour to the Paula G Show. And website is paulagvoice.com. Thank you all.
Thank you, Paula. You see that? You see what she did just there?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was good. So thank you so much. But we're going to be here every week. We're just trying to help people not only navigate through crisis, but to really think about what's next. And hopefully, when we're done with COVID-19, we'll all be just a little better than we were when we went in, and a little bit more prepared for what comes next. So thank you all for joining us. We'll edit this and post it. It'll be available on our Facebook page. And
Well, we appreciate you joining us today, taking a little bit of time out of your schedule. We know that time is valuable, and we're just thankful that you chose to share a little bit of yours with us.
all right. Yeah. I'll take care. Bye now.